Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar on managing your online reputation. This webinar is, of course, brought to you by the Queensland Government as part of the exciting Small Business Week, and we're very excited to be bringing it to you. Our company's a creative collective, and we love delivering webinars, particularly on topics like this related to online success, which is what we know a lot about. For those of you who are into Twitter out there, I'll get Anthony to text chat you the @businessqldgov. That's the Twitter handle for this department at Queensland Government. You might like to tweet them now and say hello or tell them that you're online with us. And the hashtag we encourage you to use is smallbiz, B-I-Z, week. So if you're not on Twitter, don't worry about that, but we're really into interaction. We love social networking, which is a big part of what we're talking about today. So do feel free to tweet at any time, either now, during the presentation, or after. I'm just going to exit. I just got a bit of feedback on that. I think it could be, I think that will help our situation a lot. Oh dear. Terribly sorry, it's jamming up on a window. Okay, let's get into today's presentation. I haven't introduced myself. My name's Yvette Adams. I've got a really extensive background in PR marketing and media. If I were to be very bold, I've actually nearly been in this game 20 years, which my colleague Anthony's eyes always raise when I say that. He doesn't realise I'm quite as old as I am, I don't think. I've been active on social networks since 2008 as well, an early adopter, as are many of our team. So I guess we've got the benefit of experience to share with you today in terms of not being afraid of these social networks, but definitely being aware that there are risks in terms of your online reputation. And so it's great you've joined us today to get some more information about how to manage those risks. I am an award-winning business owner. I've started multiple businesses, as you can see there on screen. These days, my real focus is being the founder, owner, franchisor of the Creative Collective, basically a creative agency based in Maroochydore, Sunshine Coast, but we do service clients across Australia and even some international ones, all different industries, some just startups, some very established businesses, and we do all sorts with them, like help them build a website, establish a PR or marketing strategy and campaign. Social media is a big part of what we do. SEO, search engine optimization, and pay-per-click, webinars, live streaming, the list goes on. We also provide a lot of training in this area. I also like to point out to people that I am a mum of two. Mine is 6 and 9. It's quite a juggle, isn't it, being a parent and owning a business? I know only too well myself, which is why I love teaching people via webinar. It means if you have got the kids for any reason, maybe they're off sick today, you can still engage in this and you don't have to drive anywhere, you don't have to arrange childcare and so on. So they're pretty cool. All right, here's what we've got in store for you today. We're going to look at what sorts of things you should track online and why, because as soon as you are getting involved in the online world, or even if you're not, you really, as a savvy business owner, should understand how to keep tabs on things, because stuff does crop up and it's good that you know what's happening and you can then make a choice about how to respond, if at all. You can look at your options when you don't like what is being said, your options for response, how to set up automatic alerts. Who'd like to know that? We'll teach you that today. The importance of citations, also known as reviews, and the importance of responding to show users that you care. We do have the ability to interact throughout the session via text chat or raising your hands. We will take questions if you'd like to unmute yourself. If you do have a setup with a mic, we'd be more than happy to talk to you, but we'll get you to keep those questions to ask on that towards the end, if you wouldn't mind. Now, just in case this is your first time on a webinar or using this particular webinar system, let me give you a really quick little lesson on how these work. You should see on your screen a little red arrow, and if you haven't got a menu that's expanded like that, I'd like you to click on it, and you can then be able to drop me a line in that area where it's blue. So I'd like you to drop me a line now to show me that you found that text chat area. It's very much like MSN chat, Skype chat, Facebook chat, if you've used any of those. Cool, Anita said found it. Elizabeth says hi there, so sure, drop me a hi or a smiley face or whatever you feel like saying. Who's suffering Monday-itis? Who has a good weekend? You might like to drop me a line about that too. Aloha, says Ronnie. Very Hawaiian of you. Very cool. Okay, good stuff. Right, the other function I want you to know how to use is this one here, the red box. It's got a hand. I'd like you to raise your hand if you had a good weekend on the weekend. Hopefully you all did. So find that hand and raise it now. Great. So when I ask you, does this apply to you? You can put up your hand and say yes or no. If I'm saying isn't, etc. You get the drill. So we're going to use the hand function and the text chat function as well. Okay. So you're here today to learn about online reputation. Get my tongue tied today. Let's get started again. Why is online reputation management important? That's what we're here today to learn about. Well, your reputation, I wonder if you agree with the statement, is one of the most important tools your business actually has. Because just think about it. You might have the best products in town, you might have the best location, the best staff, all of that stuff. But if your reputation at any point is tarnished in any way, to a small degree or a large degree, you don't have much, do you? So who believes that statement's true, that it is one of the most important things you can have is your reputation intact and hopefully people thinking good things about you? There we go, lots of hands. So in today's online world, there's a lot of comments and interactions about your business around the world. You know, they don't necessarily just happen in your corner block. And I think this next slide sums it up really well for me, which is in a world where every consumer is a reporter, every business owner and employee should be a marketer. So here's the thing, on the left-hand side, you've got people with phones and tablets, and we all sort of walk around with these, don't we now? We're wired, most of us have online access, and we can go into a restaurant, a clothes shop, whatever it is we're doing, and we can have a good experience, a bad experience, or an indifferent experience, and we can share that with the world. You know, once upon a time, we used to talk about word of mouth being the most powerful form of marketing, and it absolutely still is. But the thing is, I challenge you that it's not really word of mouth anymore, it's actually world of mouth. So not just that one person might be told, or those 9 people, it might be 900,000 people if they had a really good reach and this thing went viral. So it can work for you, it can work against you, but I guess what this statement's also suggesting is that you need to get savvy with this stuff. Whether marketing is your forte, if you care about your reputation, you or someone in your organization does need to keep tabs on this kind of stuff. I'm going to move on. Right, it's important to first look at where are people talking. So we think of social media, we often think, oh well, Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and those kinds of big networks, but there's a whole lot more places people can talk about you than just on those. Now I realize this diagram is really quite small and you probably can't make out everything on there, but there's probably a few little diagrams you can see and will recognize, but they're basically places people can have a conversation. Now this diagram is called the conversation prism. Anthony might like to send out that link in case you'd like to go and take a closer look at it. But you can see there's all these different aspects of social media. You've got video, you've got location, you've got reviews and ratings, business networking, blogs, blog platforms, social commerce, the list goes on. So the point I want to make here is that people probably are talking about you whether you like it or not. And they're also probably talking about your competition. So the trick is really tuning in to start with and knowing how to find out what's being said and then what you might want to do about it. We do encourage you to get really proactive with your reputation. We don't want you to be reactive where you only get involved if someone says something negative or something positive. You kind of want to be ready and positioned for that. So the first thing I'd like to know is, how do you currently receive feedback from people involved in your business? Love you to text chat through what you're doing in this regard, whether you're doing online surveys formally, quarterly, yearly, are you handing out or getting rating cards on the table if you're in the hospitality or retail type thing? Have you never sought feedback? Which one of these categories does your business fall into? And of course that can be quite informal. You might just be getting feedback over the counter on how their meal was or what their service was like tonight, etc. Okay. Nicolaj says, never sought feedback. So that's great that you're on today. Informal conversation, says Anita. Laurie says she's used to Facebook to ask questions but never received a response to date. Maybe we can help you change that. Periodic client survey, says Elizabeth, and periodic testimonials for marketing. Right, well, they're all really good points. The thing is, you kind of want to get proactive with this and get a system in place because it helps you understand where they're at now before something happens. You know, sometimes people won't give you the feedback to your face. They'll be standing at that, you know, reception desk saying, yeah, the training was great, let's say, but really in their head they're thinking, but I didn't like the food, it was difficult to get a car park, and I thought the presenter went too fast, maybe. So therefore, it can be useful to send out written options where people can be a bit more anonymous and perhaps more honest. So you need to set up more mechanisms in place in your business to capture these. Now, as a company, I've always done this with customers, but what we realized we weren't doing very well was actually asking for feedback from our contractors, our trainers, and our staff. And, you know, they're at the coalface, if you like, of the business, and they often are aware of what's going on or what's affecting the business or what's affecting their ability to do their job. So earlier this year, for the first time, we actually did do that, and we incorporated some of that feedback, which was anonymous, into our strategic planning meeting. And it certainly did uncover some things that we weren't aware of. So we were really, really glad that we did that exercise. Look, here's an example of just how damaging even employees can be, you know, standing aside from the customers. So this is a real post that was on Facebook. It's in the UK, so I'd like you to have a little look there. If you're wondering what the P45 is that she's referencing, that's what you get when you finish up at a job. It's like your tax final information. So this girl's gone on there. She's had a real whinge about her boss. We've tried to blank out the expletives, but you probably work it out anyway. So she totally forgot that this guy was her friend on Facebook. So that would have looked pretty bad. And, you know, a lot of people think that because it's their personal Facebook, they can say whatever they like. They can have an opinion. Well, they can, but I want you all to know that those comments can and will be used against you in a court of law. There's actually been examples in Australia where someone really didn't like their boss. The boss actually wasn't their friend, and they were saying pretty inappropriate things about their boss. And it wasn't the boss that saw the comments, but it was another staff member who alerted the boss to these comments. And even if you delete them, too late, they'd already taken the screenshots and so on. Well, this particular individual who'd posted the comments said, that's my personal space, I'm allowed to have my opinion, he can't do anything about it. Well, actually, the boss could, and he did, and it went all the way to the High Court, and the company won. So that's something for you to be aware of. Have some mechanisms in place to see what your staff think, look after them, and that's another compelling reason to, I guess, manage your personal reputation, because this stuff can happen. So let's look at ways that you can find out what is being said about your business. Well, as I've started indicating, I really encourage you to start at home base. Ask your existing customers, your contractors and staff for feedback. The sorts of things you really want to get out of them is, what do they think of the business that you do? You know, I found it interesting to discover that some of my staff, the business I think we're in and the business they thought they were sort of working for, they were close, but they weren't exactly aligned. So that said to me, we had some work to do on our vision and communicating that to our staff. You know, what do they think is your number one strength? It's still valuable to get feedback on the positives in your business. And then what do they think is your number one weakness? Like, let's really pinpoint this. Doing ratings is really good. So let's say we run an event, we'll often use a rating system to get every aspect of the event rated from 1 to 10, with 10 being good and 1 being poor. So we might say, how was the car parking? How was the communication, you know, leading up to the actual event? How was the catering? How were the presenters? We'll actually ask for every single person who features at the event what they thought, and so on. So good to get those. And communication is key. You know, people feel happy usually when they've had good communication, so that's certainly something to ask as well. And the other thing is, it's one thing to actually obtain this information, but you've actually got to do something with the data. So if you don't do anything, there's pretty much no point in doing it. So who here has asked questions like this? Is this giving you some ideas? And who has asked their customers, contractors and staff? I'd love you to text in and hear what you have to say on that front. While you're sending those in, and I really am curious to see what you've got to say, I also want to make sure you're aware that if you are doing social media, your company has a Facebook page and so on, and look, even if you don't, I think you should have one, because the fact are there's a high chance that your staff are on some, if not many, of these social networks. The biggest mistake I see companies make when it comes to social media policies is that they take a template that was actually designed for someone else and they create a very, I guess, vanilla policy. It doesn't mean a lot. It sort of makes these broad statements, generalizations. I'm quite a big fan of really getting quite specific. So, for instance, are your staff allowed to be on LinkedIn? If they are, what sort of image should they use? Do they need to be in your staff uniform? Do they need to be in front of the orange background? Do they need to have a head and shoulders cut? Do they need to consider their personal grooming? You know, is elaborate hairstyles, coloured hair, piercings quite acceptable or not really suitable to your business? What's the title they should use on a LinkedIn profile? Should it be exactly what features on their business card, or are they allowed to call themselves a manager or something that is perhaps more of an aspiration than the actual reality? So that's the sort of level of specificity, I couldn't get that word out, never can, that I would be encouraging you to look at. Some other questions to ask yourself to develop a good social media policy that minimises the risk and helps keep your online reputation intact is who will be allowed to post on your social networks. You know, is your youngest and newest team member allowed to post? And if so, what are they allowed to post? Because I'm not saying they shouldn't just because they're young and new. They might have, you know, access to great stuff. And in fact, a lot of the young people are very good at social media. They understand it. It's second nature to them. And they could add a lot of value, but you generally need to give them some boundaries to work within. When are they allowed to post? Just whenever they feel like. I saw a classic example the other day of a government organisation that had got into social media, had a Facebook page. They had 2 designated people that they were posting whenever they felt like it, and they were posting 10 times a day and practically cannibalizing each other's posts. And I said as delicately, as tactfully as I could, you know, you really want to sort of just do 1 or 2 posts a day, maybe 1 in the morning and 1 at night, and maybe you want to decide who's going to make those posts just to get a rhythm on, because really none of their posts were having any sort of reach whatsoever because they were just pumping them out. How are they allowed to post is another question. So can they just post direct on these networks, or do you use a management or monitoring tool? I'll introduce you to some of those in a moment. Some of those tools are pretty good because you can actually schedule stuff in advance, even at a very basic level. You've got the ability on, say, Facebook to write a post and actually schedule it to go out at a later date and time. So that can be good if they're allowed to do these, but someone in authority, perhaps someone who can spell, perhaps someone who guides the company brand, can actually go in and double check that they're suitable to move forwards with. The next one is, where can they post to? You know, can the person that you've designated post on every single network or only certain ones? And finally, what should they do if there's any negative feedback? If you have got the young person in your office managing the social networking, do they have the maturity? Do they have the, I guess, insights into how you would like those situations managed should they arise? So, you know, it's pretty important that you do take a good look at this, and I hope I've given you some good questions there to consider. Now, once you've got the social media policy, actually, I'm going to go back one step, and I want to know at this point, hands up if you do have a social media policy in place and you're pretty certain that it's sufficient for your needs right now. Let's see how well we're doing on this front. So we've got one hand up from Lisa and Susan. Wow, you're the only 2. And you know what? Last I knew, it was about 10% of the Aussie business population have these in place. So you're not alone if you don't have one. But you are at risk with your online reputation if you don't have one. So I encourage you to go away, and I've made it as simple as I can, answering, you know, the 5 W's and the 1 H, which is good journalism practice really, is a good way to get started on that. All right, things to monitor. So I'm going to show you the monitoring tools in a moment, but here's the things I believe all businesses should monitor. Number one, I think you should monitor on social networks, and this is whether you are involved in social networking or not, your company name, perhaps your URL as well, your website address. The reason being, if people are talking about your business, you know when they're talking about you, because sometimes they don't tag you into these conversations, so you might not be aware, but using professional management and monitoring tools, you can actually pick up on sometimes very nice testimonials and comments, and because the person's quite new to social media, they didn't know how to tag you in. Other times, they are actually having a whinge. They might be mighty surprised, maybe even impressed, if you do jump on them and show that you care. So that's something I encourage all businesses to track, is your company name, probably your personal name as well. I like to know what people out there are saying. Of course, this is more of an issue the more high profile you become. And I don't know if you are a face of your business or a known sort of brand, if you like. Some of you will be and some of you won't be. It probably depends on what you do. For instance, I know personal trainers, mortgage brokers, real estate agents, businesses like that, life coaches and consultants often are the face of their business, so people may well be talking about them as opposed to the business. Same goes on this point number two. You may well like to track your staff or key contractor names. You know, if you want to know if they got in the pub brawl on the weekend and that black eye was not from falling over, social networks might be a really good way to find that out. So there we go. That's point number three, actually, the names of all key employees, depending on your social media policy. Number four, product and service names and URLs. You know, do you make some whiz-bang widget? Well, if it's got a certain name and you're a market leader for that, you might want to track where that widget is mentioned, again, whether people like it or don't like it, or your location, or your whatever special words are just unique to you and your business, I guess, is what I'm trying to encourage you to look at. You can also monitor, depends how much stuff you want to monitor, and I guess it's got to be realistic and manageable too, but your industry, you know, are there key blogs you want to monitor from key people that you respect what they're talking about? Maybe they're trendsetters, message boards, consumer review sites, you know, getting insights into your industry could be good stuff to share on your social networks, or also get a finger on the pulse of what's really happening. Number six is a funny one, and it actually ties in with why we've got an image of someone knitting on a bus on there or on a train. We had a guy from Queensland Rail based in Brisbane come and speak at one of our events last year, and he said that from really monitoring their social media networks really effectively, QR or Queensland Rail discovered that a lot of their target market were really interested in knitting, would you believe, and craft, because they were using their commute time on public transport that Queensland Rail was providing to knit, basically. So once they discovered this, they discovered that putting out posts with patterns and fabrics and things to do with craft was a really great way to engage their social networks. And so it was a great way to mix up the marketing message rather than this train is late, this new thing's happening. They could also throw in some of that quite random stuff, but it went down really well. It could even be your own personal interests. I mean, maybe you follow the NBA basketball in America. You can monitor that and get updates of every play-by-play that happens. You can, totally legally, without any dodgy stuff, also track your competitors. So it could be their company name, their URLs, their key employees, their products, and that can be great company intelligence. You know, when they release a new product, you might find out first. When their product's getting really bad reviews, might be a really good time to do a whole lot of promotion on how fantastic your product is. So I'm curious, are any of you already monitoring these sorts of things for your business? Hands up if you are, and I'd love you to text in what sorts of stuff you are tracking. Don't worry, Rebecca, she's saying, how do you track it all? I'm going to show you as part of this presentation. We're getting to that. Before we do get to that, I want you to know the reasons to monitor. I think some of these are obvious, but let's go through them. Number one, brand awareness and image. You know, how well known is your brand? Is your brand visibility and profile increasing, or is it on the decline? What's the image people have of you? So again, you know, maybe you think you're this type of business and this is the way you're trying to position in the market, but maybe your market see you quite differently, and that comes across really loud and clear online. So therefore you've got a choice, don't you, to go where the market wants you to go, or to actually reposition through careful branding and building awareness. There's lots of different things, and it's a whole new topic in itself of how you achieve that. Other reasons to monitor is sales opportunities. Do you know, I've got, my partner's a builder, and we've got some alerts set up. So if people say on social networks, I need a builder, and they're within a certain geographic area, we jump on them and we say, hey, well, we're a builder and how can we help you? Kind of freaks people out, but it's kind of really clever marketing because you're getting to them first. Sure, you could rely on having big networks and people referring and so on, but you can get even more clever with it. This is a real positive aspect of monitoring and managing your online reputation. Customer service and feedback, of course, we've already looked at that. Performance, you know, how is your new product launch performing? Let's say you create cars, you really do want to know what do people think it's like in terms of performance. And marketing campaigns, let's say you're in a big marketing phase promoting a certain product, event, whatever, pretty good to know what people are saying about it, who's retweeting it, thanking them, and just generally keeping track on it. Maybe even events as well. We run a lot of events, and a lot of people do help us get the word out there. So it's really interesting to us to see which events fly and get shared and go viral, and to make sure we look after those people who are doing that. A little insider tip, we actually look for people who do this for us just cause. Maybe they've been to one of our trainings or just like us, and we'll actually tap them on the shoulder and thank them, and then look at ways to partner and work with them and kind of leverage our time. Usually pretty surprised when we do that, but we are listening, and they usually love the opportunity. Just the other day, I tapped someone on the shoulder who was in Singapore and said, I really like what you've been doing, and I'd like you to do some stuff for us, and she was amazed, and that was all because she was doing a bunch of shout outs on social networks for us. I recognized it, thought she was doing a good job, so now I'm finding ways to create a win-win situation. Who likes some of those ideas I've just shared? Their little minds ticking of how their business could benefit. Raise your hands if you're starting to think, oh yeah, that could be quite good. Tell me more, which I will. We have already sort of introduced you to this concept of it not being word of mouth, it being world of mouth. Let's explore that concept a little bit further. I think you guys get it, but the whole reason, I guess, this social media thing is so really so powerful is once upon a time we used to Google stuff, didn't we? And people still do. Let's say we did want a nice steak restaurant to go out to this weekend, so we could go ahead and Google steak restaurant. Actually, I'm going to be in Melbourne soon, so I was looking for a restaurant in South Bank, close to my hotel, to take out a VIP guest. Here I was Googling around, and then I sort of was getting really mixed reviews from lots of places, and I was thinking, I don't know what these places are like, and the pictures never do the things justice. So I went straight to Facebook, and I just put out, does anyone know somewhere in South Bank that's nice to go? You know, it's a VIP guest, so want something nice, but not something, you know, ridiculously expensive. And I got some great recommendations back, and what I found great was that there were themes. There were people all agreeing that certain ones were really good, and you know, when certain things were getting recommended several times over, I felt quite comfortable with that. So of course we're more likely to trust word of mouth recommendations from our friends and family or peer groups. You know, if they are your peers, there's a high chance that you have similar values and will be into similar things. So pretty nice situation to get in if you were that restaurant that the people all recommended that I did end up booking at. And another thing to be aware of, it's not really taken off yet, but it's on its way. Facebook graph search is very much going to increase the importance of positive reviews on Facebook. So there is actually a section on your business page where it has recommendations. Hot tip, if you do have something that can be recommended, we're now very much encouraging people to go over onto our page and not just do a shout out, say, hey, that was a great webinar, to actually go and recommend us and tell us, you know, how many stars out of 5 would you give that experience you had with our company? So that's something you can certainly be encouraging people to do. Is anyone already using the Facebook recommendations, which will impact on your graph search? You're aware of what I'm talking about? Ronnie is, and that looks like about all. Great, well, hopefully I'm teaching you guys something new. So this is very cutting edge information, and I do encourage you to go onto your Facebook page, see if you can see it, and encourage other people. Maybe you've got some existing customers who've just had a really good experience with you very recently, and you could go and ask them to do that for you. Okay, how to monitor. I think you're quite interested in this. You're going, yep, we get it. We know why, but we want to. How do we actually do it? Well, look, there's lots of different ways. There are free tools, which we figured would share with you first up. There's lots of paid tools as well. We, as a company, do use a lot of professional software. We do pay a lot of money for that. We're presuming a lot of you are small businesses and probably don't need to go to that extent. So we're just going to introduce you to some of the free ones today, which we thought would be a good place to check. I'm curious though, are any of you using these tools already, or are you using other tools to monitor your social networks and other online activity already? Send in what you're doing. Elizabeth said yes, Google Alerts. Anita's using her Google Alerts. TweetDeck says Elise. Facebook Insights, Kelly says. HootSuite, Deb. Google Alerts. I'll tell you a funny joke. I call Google Alerts poor man's media monitoring. But don't worry, I use it too. HootSuite didn't. Okay, so Laurie said she had a HootSuite account but didn't know you could monitor. LinkedIn Insights, Google Search, Facebook Insights, Google Alerts. Great. So lots of us are using these. Look, even if you are, maybe I can give you just a couple of tips in these. So let's go through them. Oops, I'll go back a step. We've already just checked that, so we'll keep going. Platforms. Okay, the first thing to understand is what platforms may you need to monitor. Now, this is very much an individual thing. I can give you some tools to monitor the terms and so on, but you may need to also now and then pop over to these actual platforms to monitor. For instance, if you're in the tourism industry, the social network TripAdvisor, because it really is a social network for the tourism industry, is very, very important to you. I was in New Zealand in the Christmas break, and my friend's the head chef of the oldest winery over there, was Montana, now called Brancott Estate. He said to me, Yvette, could you please do a TripAdvisor review after this? That's all my boss cares about when it comes to my performance. So it doesn't care how well he turns up every day, manages the kitchen, turns out amazing dishes, adds creativity to the menu. All the boss wants to know is how many good ratings are we getting on TripAdvisor. Hands up if you are in the tourism industry, and TripAdvisor is very, very important to you and your business as well. So Astrid is, Ronnie, Susan, great. So I would love your insights. I'm aware that you just have to go on there and see what people are saying. It might be a daily job depending on how active it is, how many guests you have coming through. It might be a weekly or a monthly job in the absolute least, but you do have to pop on over and see them. Look, Urban Spoon is another one that if you're in the restaurant sort of trade, you probably need to pop on over and have a look. Yelp up here does have an Australian office. It is gaining momentum. It's bigger in some other countries in the world. In America, for instance, it's massive. You'll find a lot of people do place their, what do you call it? They place their recommendations and comments on there, so it's important that you monitor it and respond to them and so on as well. Google Plus also is another place that you might like to have a look. Actually getting recommendations on Google Plus can really help your rankings on Google, so it's good to encourage people to go back and do those, even for just a while, to boost your rankings. And Penfold there has made the comment, I use TripAdvisor before all my holiday bookings. Yeah, me too, Anne. I'll look on there and then I'll also ask the peer group on Facebook or something like that. So good point though, you know, we're all looking at it before we make our bookings, and so if you are in that industry, you really should be monitoring it, because if there's not such good stuff on there, you might be missing out on a whole lot of bookings. All right, quite a few of you have said that you use Google Alerts. So I'm just going to take you through, because it is only an hour I've got with you, though I'm happy to take questions at the end if you want more in depth. Two tools I just can't live without if I want to do at least some level of online reputation management. So this is a really good place to start. So apart from being an amazing search engine, Google has a lot of free tools, and just one of them is called Google Alerts. To get to it, you go to google.com/alerts. You will need a Google account. You can get one of those at google.com/accounts. That is different to a Gmail account, though if you have a Gmail account, you probably do have a Google account. So it'll basically ask you to log in. And then as you can see in the top right there, you can set a search query. So So when I was saying earlier, remember, I encourage you to track things like your company name, your name. You can see down here in the purple, I've got those set up. Now the rabbit ears, the two quotations at either end, mean I don't want to just get anything that turns up with the word creative or the or collective. Imagine the huge amount of absolute rubbish I would get that was not at all relevant to my business if that's what I did. By putting it in the rabbit ears, I'm saying I'm only interested if people write the and creative and collective together in one sentence. Now, I'm a bit unlucky, and you might be too. There are other the creative collective people. In fact, I have the trademark, but it's very hard to enforce globally. People are using it for this and that. Little craft groups pop up. There was a little blog that popped up for a while there. So sometimes there's stuff that is not relevant, but you accept that because you do dig out the stuff that really is relevant. And using this, I will discover that I've had a media piece written on me. Fantastic. Share that on your social networks. I'll find out that people have gone on the page and commented on something and said what their most recent experience is or was with our company. So also really good. So similarly, rabbit ears, my name. Now, that's a funny one to do, actually. You'll start getting alerts for any time that name is mentioned. There are other Yvette Adamses in the world, as there may be for your name, depending on how common your first and last names or combination of them are. Good luck if you're a John Smith. There's probably quite a few alerts out there. And as a result of that, same thing. I get some stuff that's relevant, some that's not. Look, you can see here at that point in time when I took the screenshot, I was tracking a bunch of other stuff for clients, programs, brands, and you can set up as many of these as you want. Now, you put the search query in here, the result type, I tend to do everything. I quite like to know the comprehensive option, but you have got news and other options in there. How often? I actually generally set that to as it happens, because if something breaks out, that's how you can see here, all of mine are as it happens. You want to know the moment it happens. You don't want to hear about it at the end of the day, and meanwhile there's been an absolute fiasco going on online that you're completely unaware of. And I also choose not only the best results, I choose all results. I like the comprehensive. So you set these, they come to your email, and look, you'll be getting a lot, so you may or may not like to check them in that way. For me, I get way too many emails, so I actually filter them off into a folder that I can refer to and go and do a big bulk hit of them. But I prefer to log into Google Alerts itself, click on it, and just have a good look at what's happening. So who here thinks they can give that a go? It's really not that hard, doesn't cost you a single cent, but it does help you with tracking what's being said about you. Now, in terms of social networks, it will pick up things on public Facebook pages. It won't pick up things on private Facebook groups. It won't pick up things on profiles. They're also generally set to private. So it'll pick up some social networking, but it'll certainly pick up media, mentions, reviews, and so on. It's not totally 100% comprehensive. You do have to pay for tools for those, but it'll give you a good start for a free tool anyway. All right, some of you have said you're already using HootSuite. Now, there's a difference between using it and actually getting some training on it. Our company does offer full training in this, and I'm clever, but I found I had to sit down and do the day training to really understand how to put this thing into perspective and get it really sorted out. Even just last night, I was reorganizing myself because there's sort of a few ways you can approach it. The way I now run it, and this is an old screenshot, I basically say, right, what are all the hats Yvette wears? So I've got a stream, a tab for Yvette Adams, my brand, my personal name, where's that being used? I've got one for the Creative Collective, I've got one for Awards Hub, I've got one for Get Up to Speed program, which is obviously a product, and on it goes. And then I have one for industry news and so on. This is how I keep tabs on multiple clients and multiple projects and keep pretty much on top of it. So, here I have a search term. So when you do this, these things here, they're called streams. So someone was saying, I have HootSuite, but I didn't know you could do this. So, of course, one of the really amazing functions of HootSuite is that you can write a message, tick multiple social networks, schedule it to go out at a later date. If you want something to go out at 4 o'clock on Christmas Eve, you could schedule that right now and it will go out on Christmas Eve. That's pretty cool. But from a management and monitoring perspective, you click Add Stream, and then when you get to the next level, it'll have an option to do the keyword search. So again, use the rabbit ears, So you can see here some of the stuff. It's found Yvette Adams mentioned there. That's not mine. So this is about someone else, but good, I know it's happened. But I can see this mentioned by Zoe definitely is me. I may choose to retweet that or thank Zoe for doing a shout out. And on it goes. So here's someone else. She's retweeted a Marketing Mag publication. I don't know her. I might choose to follow her and enter into a conversation. So this is how the stuff works. Here's another one, The Creative Collective, and on it goes. So do we all think we could go on there and set up those keywords? Kelly says, I had no idea this was available. This is awesome, isn't it, Just? I'm glad, you know, even if you've just got on and discussed this, that's great. Elizabeth says we will upgrade what we're doing here. That's good. So we'll take these things to the next level. So look, with HootSuite, you can get a fair amount of functionality free. I believe the next plan up is only $5.95 US a month, so it's not going to break the bank. You may find to set up the number of streams and things you want to, that you do have to increase it. But I think, gosh, for $6, it's a pretty cheap investment in managing your online reputation. Here's a tool I'm curious. I wonder how many of you know this one. Hands up if you already know and use Social Mention. Yes, no, one of you. Susan Milner, who've been on lots of our webinars, so they're good. Renee, Samantha. Okay, cool. So those of you who don't, that's not many of the 42 odd people on. Social Mention is a social media search and analysis platform. So this is quite comprehensive when it comes to managing and monitoring your social media mentions. So you can see on screen it tracks and measures what they're saying about you. It can track Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google, etc. And it also provides data on comment sentiment. So this is an interesting one. For us, we will work with clients, and sometimes when we're trying to turn a brand around, perhaps there has been negative sentiment and that's why they've come to us. We'll set up, you know, tools like this, and it shows, because sometimes what we do is hard to kind of measure or prove to people, but using tools like these, suddenly it gets easier. So we can show them that, look, you used to have quite a poor reputation out there. It's turned. We're now sort of, you know, middle, and let's turn that into positive, and our job here is done. On that note, the guys from Queensland Rail, when they first started, I guess, getting into social media, as a whole, the sentiment was really quite negative, and it was really quite forward-thinking for Queensland Rail to get a team in-house that, you know, was going to specialise in this. And like anything, they had to set up their strategy and decide what were the key performance metrics they were going to seek. For them, it was that they turned around the negative sentiment towards their brand to be positive. So they've had to do all sorts of hard work and testing and trialing to work that out. And the knitting insight was just one of those. But they have managed to turn it into positive, and that's an example of how great it is to you know, turn these around. So Anthony, I might get you to send out Social Mention if you haven't already, and that's another tool, yet another one that after this webinar you might like to check out. So look, I've given you some tools, just a few in the time we have, that are totally free. They're not hard to set up, nice and easy. Like I said, we do have much more advanced ones, but that would be an advanced session if we would take you with it. We'd need a whole lot more time with you. I do want to now touch on what to do if you don't like what they say. It could be that you'll go away from this webinar, set these things up, and discover, uh-oh, there's some people saying some not so favourable stuff about us. And to give you a practical example of this, we were about to start working with a bed and breakfast, and this woman was lovely, the place was lovely, and she wanted me to do all this proactive marketing, and just as part of our starting to work with them, I went and did a bit of research using some of these professional tools to discover what was being said about her, you know, what was the general sentiment. I discovered there was some not so positive stuff. So I brought that back to her and I said, what is this? Where did this come from? And I said, actually, my first question was, were you aware of this? And she said, no, I wasn't. And she was really quite upset about it. And I said to her, what do you want to do about it? She said, well, nothing. You know, that woman was horrible. I remember her. On the day she came, there were builders in, and she wasn't very understanding of that. So that's her point of view. So I guess, you know, the thing you've got to balance here, though, is the customer's always right, or not always, but you've got to find a way to I guess, see things from their point of view. And I do think respond. This particular woman decided she didn't want to respond. She wanted nothing to do with it, despite my best attempts to convince her otherwise. So therefore, that message was still out there with no response, which I believe made her brand look like it didn't care and or wasn't aware of it. The biggest thing is not to panic, which is perhaps what this person did. So there's a few possible courses of action, and here's the sort of process I want you to go through. If there's something that doesn't look so favorable, I want you to try and keep your head screwed on and go through this kind of list. And by the way, there's a workbook made available to you as part of this workshop, and this mentions some of the stuff, so you've got that as a reference point. You might like to have it easy access. First up, what is the complaint really about? You know, is this person just having a bad day, or is it a genuine and, you know, fair enough complaint, and what are you going to do about it? Are they referring to a specific incident, or is it just a general bad customer experience in terms of what they're saying? Did it happen to them or someone else? Are they talking about, you know, my friend had a really bad experience with your company, maybe going and crusading for them? I remember a girlfriend of mine had a really bad haircut. She was so upset, and she just didn't have it in her to complain, that I actually did so on her behalf and said how awful they were. And I did it publicly. And I was hoping for a response and to get a result, because they just hacked her hair off and she was devastated. What specifics are cited? Are they talking products, services, people, places, times? Who is the person making the complaint? So, for instance, I have seen cases of companies receiving complaints and it turns out it's from their competitor who's trying to make them look really bad, or it's from one disgruntled customer who just has a bee in their bonnet, and, you know, the issue's been solved, they've given them the earth, and this person still wants to take a mile. So let's ascertain exactly who it is as well. Are they in your community? So I saw an example of a cafe, and when they rang, they were very distraught, as these sorts of clients often are. They said, oh my gosh, this person's out there on Facebook saying all these awful things about our cafe. And I had to go through these questions with them. And one was, are they in your community? Yes, they're on the Sunshine Coast. And my next question was, how big is their reach? So, you know, if this person had 5 Facebook friends, that's not ideal, but this person actually had about 3,000, so that was less than ideal. And it meant, I guess, helped me evaluate the gravity of the situation. You also need to work out what's important to them. What are they going for? You know, was the fact that it was their wedding anniversary and they'd paid all this money and it was their first holiday without kids in 10 years or something like that? Is that what is important to them? So therefore, how can you, I guess, respond with all of that on board? The other thing is, on what complaint was the platform was the complaint made? Was it on TripAdvisor? Was it on Google, Facebook? Obviously, there's all these platforms. What are they really upset about? Have they complained about this elsewhere? Because sometimes they'll go on an absolute tirade. They'll go on multiple channels. So it's pretty important for you to actually respond in each and every channel, because if someone goes on TripAdvisor, you haven't responded, even though you know you've responded over on Facebook, the person checking that TripAdvisor you know, listing for that company doesn't know that. So that's important too. And is this a new or existing issue, or even a recurring issue? Because if that's the case and there's maybe some truth in it, it's something that you need to look at. So look, on screen there, we've got an example of someone having a whinge about Woolworths partway throughout the meal, found a chunk of cardboard in it, and good on Woolworths, they're actually jumping on board. Now, what they've done really well in this case, Woolworths, is they've said we're very concerned. They're saying they want to take the issue offline. That is actually a really good course of action, particularly if the customer is really quite disgruntled, because you don't really want to have a big public brawl, if you like, on social media. I've seen that. I've seen a photography company that, you know, had a disgruntled customer, and it went back and forth with the company and the customer. It was very public. Everyone could see it. Totally unnecessary. Not good for the company. Not good for the customer. Really, what that company should have done is said, we are concerned along the lines of what Woolworths has done here. Please call us, and here's our details. So it shows you do care and that you're making yourself available. But by taking it offline, it's not word of mouth. It's not there for everyone to see. It becomes a more private issue, and hopefully you can resolve it a lot quicker. So with some of these things helping you guys, you know, in terms of what processes you might need to do. You can see some questions coming through. We may cover it in the next few slides, and if not, let's go through some questions at the end. It's really important, and this must sound so straightforward, but people forget to do it, to just remain calm. Simply breathe. And sometimes you actually might need to buy yourself a bit of time, because there's no point responding when you're emotional. There's a few times that you really shouldn't respond to something on social media, and that's under the influence, and it's when you're emotional as well. So remain calm, but not doing it straight away doesn't mean you're going to ignore it. But basically do it when you're in a better space, and you may need to, I don't know, get some help with getting into a better space. Talk to a business coach, talk to your staff, discuss it with a friend or partner, someone that you value their opinion, and will help you make the common sense approach rather than fueled with emotion, anger, upsetness, etc. Take it offline, as I've already explained. If you are in the wrong, it does take a big person, but it's much better to admit it than just to deny that you had any part in it at all. Sometimes you need to ask how you can fix it, because you actually don't know. Sometimes these customers will have hidden agendas. They're not really being clear. They're emotional, so their communications can be quite all over the place. So sometimes simply by responding and saying, we would love to fix this issue and would appreciate your suggestions on how it could be resolved, something along those lines could be a really good response. With all of that, though, it can be time consuming, but I think it's worth the investment of the time. If you don't deal with this and you don't see it through, they can pop up and become a big mess. A PR fiasco, online reputation disaster, even a legal issue. So if you are going to own it, I tell my staff this, if they are dealing with an issue, see it through, and if you do hand it over to someone, make it very clear, you now own this issue and you need to see it through. I'm not taking part in this anymore. So there's no confusion of, oh, I thought you were getting back to them, and look, no one did. Meanwhile, this client is still irate. It's a good idea to update people as early as you can, respond and as often as you can. If there are developments in progress, like let's say I would like to offer you a free night's accommodation at the hotel, but I need to ask the manager, go and ask the manager. You might need to then say, look, the manager's away on holiday, it's going to take a little longer than I thought, but keep updating them so they know that you're on it, and they'll really appreciate those efforts that you're going to. Be transparent. When I talked about the woman who had the B&B and she had the issues, I think it's okay to say, look, we had builders in, we realised it was a little bit noisier than usual, and we didn't think it would impact on our customers to the level that it did. So just being open and honest could really help them, rather than trying to say, oh, it wasn't loud, and sort of making it their problem. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense, so sometimes you have to be strategic about this. You might need to play a plot or plan a good strategic game if it's quite a big issue. And just don't underestimate the power of social media. We are seeing everyday influencers pop up, people with thousands and thousands of followers and friends. They're everyday people, but they can have certainly a lot of power. So the biggest thing of all is what's on screen, and that's to show that you're listening and you are doing your very best or taking steps to rectify it. Let me give you some examples of this, because I can say all this stuff, but sometimes it doesn't mean anything unless you actually see an example. So here's Brisbane Airport. I was a traveller. I got home late on a Friday night. I was pretty tired. I was pretty grumpy. I was even hungry. Hangry, which is hunger with angry. That's not a good combination. And I got out the airport and I could not work out where to get my bus. They'd changed it all. The signage was all over the shop. So I tweeted them. I was disgruntled. And you can see here, this is my first comment down the bottom, been in and out of the airport 4 times this week for business travel, and think the revised pickup zone is too far and wet, not happy. And they came back with, bear with us, construction still underway. Access to Skywalk coming soon will improve access to and from the terminal. Anyway, I wrote, good to know what's going on, and love the fact that you monitor Twitter on a Friday night. Have a good one, guys. This was my second one, actually. Good to get such a quick response. The signage to C1 is seriously lacking too. There are 2 signs that point to each other. And they actually came back to me and said, where are they? And I said, outside Jetstar Domestic. So I was being helpful to them. They were resolving an issue that they weren't even aware of. and they were being responsive on a Friday night. Now, you might say, there's no way I'm replying to customers on Twitter on a Friday night. But look, if you're sitting watching the footy and you get this disgruntled person, it's not that hard to text back, which is effectively what Twitter is. It's a text message online, and better that than having a disgruntled person with all these thousands of followers. I mean, we have 4,000 followers, and that's only on one network. We have tens of thousands across the others. I could have been quite damaging to that brand if I wanted to, but I was just pleased that they responded. So that was a good example. Here's a not so good example. This is a hotel. I'm not naming the hotel, but we had checked in to say that we're here, not just at the physical hotel, but on the online Foursquare option as well. And they came back to us and said, thanks for staying at wherever it was. Hope to see you again soon. So we thought, oh, great, they want to have a chat. We'll do that. We said, thanks. It was a great hotel, but disappointed with internet access. We'd called ahead to check suitability, but it was no good. We were trying to run a webinar from there. We'd rung ahead, and they assured us that it would be suitable, and then they gave us a card for 100 megabytes, which was slow and was just not enough for us to do our webinar. It went deathly silent. Not one as soon as we made that comment, they just stopped talking to us, which we thought was very, very poor and didn't make us think very highly of that hotel. And you know what? We've never stayed back there since, and we actually do quite a lot of business travel with quite a few of us traveling. So that's what not to do. I'm conscious of the time. It's whizzing by. I'm having a ball, though, so I'm going to go fast through these. Here's another couple of examples. A negative reputation. So an automotive company had lots of locations, lots of happy customers. There were a few disgruntled ones who had left comments about the company on Yelp, and the company felt its online reputation was out of alignment with its offline reputation, which was pretty positive. So what do they do about that? Well, they got access to the monitoring platform, and they started monitoring this and reporting on it weekly. And they got some recent customers and got their feedback and asked them to leave it. So they got more proactive with soliciting customers. And so if they were negative or positive, they started responding. So customers suddenly saw that, hey, you know, they do care. The thing to know about that too is it's quite unrealistic probably to think you'll have 100% of your customers happy 100% of the time. I personally don't know any companies that can achieve that. There's always someone, no matter what you do, that seems unhappy. So, you know, just by showing that you do have positive can balance out the negative, I guess. Here's another one. A company had a Google search, and their name for a home security company showed on the first 10 results, and 7 of them were negative. It included an unflattering video with the complaints on rip-off report, so that a satisfied customer base, but just a few bad experiences with people who decide to get really vocal. This is not an example I've personally worked with, but I do know of one very, very similar. Same thing, if you Googled this woman's name, she had a great reputation. Lots of people loved her. I thought she was fantastic at what she did, but there was just one customer who decided to be very vindictive and write some pretty bad stuff about them. So it was a very similar way to resolve it as this example. They created positive content on YouTube. So YouTube's the second biggest search engine. If you get lots of good content on there, you can actually get those videos positioning quite high on Google and pushing the other content down. I also asked other websites to link to their YouTube channel. In a few cases, they contacted the bloggers who were disgruntled and see if they could change their negative stance. It did take 12 months to purge the front page, but they did manage to do it, and I reckon it's worth it, because imagine all the lost sales if that continued to be what people saw when they first Googled that company. So look, I'm about to wrap up and open it up for questions, but with all of this, there is a fair bit to it. You may or may not have the skills, or you may or may not have the time. If you're not confident, here's some options. Number one, get more training. We've only had an hour with you. We do run in-person training where we go into this stuff much more detail. Would love the opportunity to work for you or work with you. Make someone at your office responsible is another option. So actually get them to report on this on a regular basis. So it could be every team meeting, they've got to show what's the sentiment, what some of the comments being made, and how they've been soliciting possibly positive testimonials. You can contract a social media professional. That's what we do for some people, and we manage multiple accounts, and we're in touch with best practice because, look, all the social networks change as to what you can and can't do. Some PR professionals do understand the online environment. Not all do. So if you are going to look to them, make sure you do check them out thoroughly and see what tools they use. Some of the stuff we've shared with you today, if they're not aware of those tools, then perhaps they're not for you. And there may even be instances where you require the services of a legal professional. Could be good to get them on standby should things ever go that way. So, in summary, remember, sort out home base first. Ask your staff, customers, and contractors and so on what they think of you and where you could be doing better. Sort that out. Set up ways to monitor and manage your online reputation. Start to respond. I've given you lots of ways to respond and things to consider, and do encourage reviews and feedback, because if they're positive, they can be very, very powerful for your business. I'm just wanting to get to the question page, which is this one. So, guys, I'm curious, do we have some questions? I think I've seen some floating around. I'll just get Anthony to queue them up for me. Fiona's asked, where are the workbooks for these webinars stored? I think Anthony may have answered, but just in case there's any confusion on that from other people on today, we actually send you an email once you've registered confirming your registration, and there's a link that you can download the workbook from, so you might like to go back and revisit those. You can actually watch these recordings. We upload them to YouTube. We share them with the Queensland Government. They do some, I guess, slight edits and things and make sure they're spick and span, and then they get uploaded to the Business QLD Gov YouTube channel. So you can go ahead and watch some. We've run quite a few this week, and it's always good to watch the most recent ones because they are, of course, the most recent information. Okay, here's another question from Anita. If someone does complain and reach a solution, should you make it public? And if so, how do you go about that without making it obvious you're trying to fix your public image? Interesting one. It really depends on the situation. Look, let's say there was a situation. Let's say you took it offline, you did resolve it. I don't think you need to go back and announce that to everyone, provided that what people see when they Google around or on your TripAdvisor or Facebook, provided they see that you did respond and you took it offline and that you did care, I think that's enough. People don't need to know all the ins and outs of what you gave them free night's accommodation, or I don't know, however you fix that. I don't think they need to know to that detail. Have we got any others? I think I'm just going to scroll through because I did see some I thought. Funny, Elizabeth said she is at home with a sick child, so I was correct in joking around about that. Feel free to text through your questions or raise your hand if you do want to ask something. John made a good comment, John Playfair, that it's important to have social medias in place and signed off by staff. Because you're absolutely right, John. It's one thing to have these things, but if you don't actually distribute them and communicate them and get them to write and say, I've read and I understand this, you don't really have a lot of legs to stand on in a court of law. Okay, going down. Lots and lots of great feedback. Maybe not so many. Everyone's just saying good session. All right, have we got any hands raised? Does anyone want to, while you've got me, just for another 5 minutes or so, ask anything related to social media, online reputation management? Feel free. On that note, if you are interested in finding out more about social media, we've got the amazing Zoe White taking a session on this Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Go ahead and register for free, and she'll tell you how to get started with social media. Some great tips on there, even for those who are already on there. Getting some lovely feedback. Thank you, guys. Very good, with lots of R's. Great presentation. Learned a lot to start building a network and profile, says Nick. Good session, Yvette. Thank you. People are saying they have to run. Fantastic. All right, well, I'll just go back 2 slides. If you want more information, the Queensland Government has an excellent website. They're adding stuff to it all the time. There's templates, workbooks, help sheets, cheat sheets, templates, and more on business.qld.gov.au. They also have a Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube account, which I encourage you to follow, like, and subscribe to, and then you'll get the latest and greatest stuff coming out. At the bottom there, you can also see there's a Queensland Government Business and Industry portal. You can get the latest alerts, information, and so on. If you don't have an account yet, it's really easy to create one. Now, finally, it is one of our requirements with these webinars to get you to fill in a survey. Only takes a minute. We'd really, really appreciate it if you could just, before you log off, answer a few quick questions for us, and then we will keep our compliance record with the Queensland Government and hopefully be in a position to deliver more webinars in the future. So look, it's been lots of fun. I love this topic. There's a fair bit to it, hey. But it doesn't need to be scary. There's lots of things to help you. It's just a sign of the times. It's a reality for every business owner managing your online reputation. So I do hope I've given you some tips. Thanks so much for getting on, and wishing you all a fantastic week in business. Keep kicking some goals, and we'll see you online on Wednesday.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye.